เจ้าพระองค์ใดมีปัญญาจากสุขขจัดสิ้นมนทินที่มองมัวตรัสรู้โดยพระองค์เองเสด็จไปดีแล้วพ้นวิเศษแล้วปลดเวนยชนให้ข้ามพ้นจากบ่วงมารทั้งมวลข้าพระองค์น้อมเสียรนมัสการพระผู้เป็นที่พึ่งของสัตว์ทั้งปวงด้วยเดชแห่งพระพุทธขอจงประสบชัยชนะสัพพะอันตรายจงพินาศไปพระธรรมใดเป็นดุจธงชัยของพระองค์นั้นแสดงทางบริสุทธิ์บอกหนทางให้คนได้เดินตามนำพาความสุขให้ผู้ที่ทรงพระธรรมไว้ทำความสงบคุ้มครองผู้มีธรรมในหัวใจพระธรรมอันเข้าไปทำลายโมหะที่อยู่ข้างในข้าพระองค์น้อมเสียรนมัสการพระธรรมที่ทำให้ความร้อนคลายด้วยเดชแห่งพระธรรมขอจงประสบชัยชนะสัพพะอันตรายจงพินาศไปสาวกใดเป็นดุจกองทัพธรรมดำเนินตามรอยบาทของพระศาสดายังกล้าแกร่งผจญบาปอุปกิเลสบนโลกนี้เมื่อพบทางสงบก็บอกสอนให้คนได้เข้าใจมุ่งทำตามพระธรรมที่พระองค์ตรัสก่อนบอกสอนใครข้าพระองค์น้อมเสียรนมัสการพระผู้มีศีลและทิฏฐิงดงามด้วยเดชแห่งพระสงฆ์ขอจงประสบชัยชนะสัพพะอันตรายจงพินาศไป
Hello, welcome to the World Buddhist Dhamma-Tutas Organization program, ธรรมะท่วมโลก. Today, the organization has headquarters and established in United Kingdom. The organization aiming to provide the information and resources to the Dhamma-Tutas around the world and bringing people together, whether they are Thai missionary monk or just the Kalyana Some people may not know what Dhamma-Tuta is. Dhamma-Tuta is the Thai missionary monk. That's the meaning of it. My name is Sara Sirilak Campbell, speaking on behalf of the organization and on behalf of Pravitesiti Tharma Porn, the Vice President of the Council of Thai Bhikkhu in USA. Today, we have our guest speaker. She has been with us before in 2020. She has given us the knowledge and explanation and teaching in the wheel of life before. Today, she has returned to give us the information and the knowledge again. Her name is Casey Thompson. It's such an honor for us to have our knowledgeable speaker, Miss Casey Thompson. How are you, Casey?
Good, really good. So happy to be here.
I'm glad to see you. It's been a long time,
Long time.
Since before COVID. If you remember, we have done the Zoom before, and she has given us the talk, teach us about the dependent origination, which is the wheel of life that we have today. Today is going to be a little bit different and freshening up, and I don't want to take up so much of time, so I'm going to turn this over to her, and then we start from there.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, my name is Casey, and today I'm going to be talking about the Wheel of Life, also known as the Wheel of Dependent Origination, Dependent Co-arising, or Paticca Samuppada. On this first slide, you can see Lord Yama, which represents time, holding the wheel of life in his grasp. So this is the idea that we're caught in this field of time and space, and we're having this experience in this body, and we're having a lot of suffering. So then you see the heaven and hell realms, and it's a detailed picture. We don't have time to go into the whole thing today. That's a different talk that I do. But to explain exactly what the Wheel of Dependent Origination is, the first thing you need to know is that the Wheel of Dependent Origination is really the same as the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are the Buddha's way of summarizing the 12 links of dependent origination. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu said, "The reason we must talk about dependent origination is that it is the heart of Buddhism." When we talk about the heart of Buddhism, most people think of the Four Noble Truths. Please understand that Paticca Samuppada is the fullness of the Noble Truths. It is the full measure of the Noble Truths. So let us call it the Great Noble Truth, the heart of Buddhism. Okay, so this is a picture of the 12 links of dependent origination. So the idea here is that in each moment, everything is conditioned upon everything else. You see down in the bottom of the circle, with the arising of this, that arises. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That's the law of conditionality, actually. So with this kind of cause and effect relationship happening, each link is dependent on the previous one for its existence. And I'm going to describe in more detail what each of these links are as we go. Ignorance, avijja, is the first link. Suffering results from stupidity, from desire, anger, and ignorance. Consider thoughtfully. Kilesa is a general term that includes greed, anger, confusion, hatred, and delusion. Therefore, suffering is the same for everyone. Namely, suffering is the result of depravity rooted in the ignorance that there is a self. That's the most crucial part here, is that ignorance means not understanding that we are just an ongoing moment-by-moment process. Consciousness with the body and mind having this experience. Instead, we take ourselves personally. We have an I, we have names. I am Casey. And with that I concept, that permanent self concept, comes all the suffering. How does that happen? I'm going to talk more about that. So with ignorance as condition, ignorance means not understanding about the wheel of dependent origination. Formations came to be. Formations is the second link in the 12. And they are what give rise to bodily functions, verbal functions, and mental functions. Formations give rise to consciousness. One monk told me that one way to think about formations is as karma seeds, sort of all the things that have happened to us before this present moment that we're in. with the way the Buddha thought about this, birth is happening over and over, many, many, many times a day. Every time the wheel goes around, there's another birth happening. So everything that's happened before this current time that the wheel turns is kind of waiting in there, ready to be set off. And that's part of why we have suffering, is our habits. Okay, the third link in dependent origination is consciousness, vijnana. Consciousness, monks, is classified simply by the requisite condition in dependence on which it arises. Consciousness that arises in dependence on the I and forms is classified simply as I consciousness. So they go through every one of the sense bases, and the idea is that consciousness is sort of like an awareness. The lights are on, but nobody's home. But the way consciousness is mediated is through these 6 sense doors. So that brings us to the next thing, name and form, body and mind, mentality and materiality is the 4th link. Et Savati, bhikkhus, this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is old kama, to be seen as generated and fashioned by volition, as something to be felt. Therein, bhikkhus, the instructed noble disciple attends carefully and closely to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. Again, the law of conditionality operating here. So now we have consciousness arises, body and mind. Now we have the 6 sense doors that we perceive the outside world with. The 6 internal bases should be understood, so it was said, and with reference to what was this said. There are the eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, the body base, and the mind base. The 6 sense bases give rise to contact. Contact, or phasa. Dependent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the tongue and flavors, tongue consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the body and tangibles, body consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the mind and mind objects, like thoughts, mind consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. So once we have our body consciousness, our body mind suit, our 6 sense bases, then contact happens and feeling occurs. In this case, feeling means sensation, not emotion, and arises from contact via the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind, and the eye, the 6 sense bases. So in this case, an example of feeling is just you touch a hot stove, and that sensation of heat is what we mean by feeling. Feeling gives rise to craving. Craving, tanha. There are 6 types of craving. Craving for forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and mental objects. Craving conditions the arising of attachment. Craving, and hence attachment, takes the form of an I like it attachment, an I don't like it attachment, or an I neither like nor don't like emotion, such as doubt, confusion, or even neutrality. So when we're talking about this, notice that craving is taking place around what we perceive through our sense bases. We get that information in, and then we have a reaction to the feeling. So we touch the hot stove, we feel the heat, and then I don't like it. Cry, pain, suffering, round and around and around on the wheel. Okay, so this is from the movie Finding Nemo. These are the seagulls. And they kept going around through the movies, and they'd see different things, and then they'd say, mine, mine, and then rush after it to get it. That's basically what we do as humans. We perceive information through our outside world, and whatever it is we perceive as ours, then we are attached to that. We need that. This is clinging. And this is another example with the monkey at the bottom, and he's trapped because he won't let go of the banana. So effectively, just the jar with the banana, he could let go of it anytime and be free, but he won't let go of the banana, so he's trapped. Spiritual disease is the disease whose germ lies in the feeling of we and ours, I and mine, which is regularly present in the mind. The germ that is already in the mind develops first into a feeling of I and mine, and then, acting through the influence of self-centeredness, becomes greed, hate, and delusion, causing upset for both oneself and others. We must recognize that the germ is clinging, upadana, and that it is of two kinds, clinging to I and clinging to mine. Clinging to I is the feeling that I is an entity, that I am like this or like that, that I am the equal of anyone. Anything of this sort is called I. Mine is taking that as belonging to me, that which I love, that which I like. Even that which we hate, we consider to be my enemy. That is called mine. This is from Heartwood of the Bow Tree by Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And it's very important also to point out that when he talks about delusion, he's talking about not understanding that there's not a permanent self, and ignorance, being unaware of the wheel of dependent origination. And greed and hate are the two sides of clinging, either needing to have it because it's associated with that permanent I concept, or not wanting it at all because it's not part of that I concept. Becoming, bhava, another way to think of it is our habitual tendencies, our habits. This is what happens after clinging. Clinging is where when you talk to someone and they're upset about something and they're going on and on about the story about why they're so upset, that's the thoughts in their head that are their justification for why they're having that suffering, why that clinging is happening. Someone else is responsible, or something happened, or whatever we tell ourselves. I also tell these stories myself. Every time there is sense contact without wisdom concerning liberation, meaning not understanding the links of the wheel of dependent origination, there will be becoming, bhava, and birth, jati. To put it another way, when there's only ignorance present at the point of sense contact, the law of dependent origination is put into motion. It couldn't be made any more clear. And if you meditate and you walk yourself back along the links of dependent origination, you'll see the thoughts, you'll see contact, feeling, craving, clinging happen like that. You can watch it happen in your own mind. Birth, jati. What is birth? It is being born, arising, coming to be among the various groups of sentient beings, the appearance of the various aggregates, the arising of a particular sense door. That is birth. Birth conditions the arising of old age and death. It means birth of the I concept. So notice here, birth is not birth into the world of a life. It's birth into having this wheel of suffering. Birth, again, of this individual identity. That's what birth, that link, is talking about. Not talking about physical birth or rebirth or anything like that. It's literally birth of the concept of a separate individual self. Aging and death. Thus, Ananda, from name and form as a requisite condition comes consciousness. From consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. From name and form as a requisite condition comes contact. From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. That's the I like it, I don't like it. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging. That's attachment, that's the story. From clinging as a requisite condition comes becoming. From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth. Becoming are the habits, and birth is the I concept happening again. From birth as a requisite condition, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of suffering. The 12 links of dependent origination go by many, many times in 1 second. They happen below conscious awareness. So it's things we've been conditioned through our previous experiences in our lifetime over time. So it's difficult to retrain our minds. And that's why meditation is so important, to try and get some space in between the thoughts so that we have a cleaner mind and a chance of doing this as we go about in the world. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about how these links depend on each other to exist. So with ignorance as condition, formations occur. With formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness is the lights are on but nobody's home yet. With consciousness as condition, name and form, body and mind, mentality and materiality. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases occur. With the 6 sense bases as condition, this is our body-mind suit, this is our equipment. Then we have contact with the outside world through our 6 sense doors. With contact, feeling happens, sensation. With feeling as condition, craving happens. That's our response to the contact. Ooh, I like the taste of that ice cream. Oh, I don't like the taste of that potato. You know, whatever this happens, you know, from the time we're in the womb, we are having craving happen. I like it, I don't like it. With craving as condition, clinging happens. This is our attachment. This is our story about why we like it, why we don't like it. And this is linked to the I concept of having a self. Oh, everyone knows that Casey's love ice cream. That's just a Casey thing. Everyone knows that Casey's hate, you know, onions. So this is the story about how the I identity is formed in response to contact with the outside world. So with clinging as condition, habits occur. This is what we always do in response to that contact. This is deep in our unconscious mind. It's just an automatic pilot reaction that we have. With habits as condition, birth occurs. We're reborn back on the wheel of suffering again in each present moment. It keeps going around and around. And with birth as condition, aging, suffering, pain, grief, lamentation, and despair, aging and death. And all of these are built on the requisite ignorance for them to happen. If you have wisdom come in, then you can take away all of these. And then at the point of feeling, you put in wisdom, and then there's no need for suffering. This is a gentle acceptance of the present moment being perfect exactly the way that it is. No need to change it. No need to like it and want to hang on to it longer. No need to want to push it away because it's uncomfortable. It's just an open acceptance. Every present moment is perfect the way that it is. And that, so the suffering comes from having these things: the craving, the clinging, the habits, the birth, and the aging and death. We get the suffering on top. Okay, now I'm going to tell some stories about how this works in our daily life. And the first one comes from a book that I loved when I was a kid. This is the monster at the end of the book. There's lovable furry old Grover on the front. And when you opened it up, he said, "What did that say? On the cover, what did that say? Did that say there'll be a monster at the end of the book?" It did? Oh, I'm so scared of monsters. He doesn't like it. Right there, it's already gone around several times just on this page. He recognizes it. He doesn't want the monster. So he spends the rest of the book trying to stop from getting to the monster at the end. Maybe you do not understand. You see, turning pages will bring us to the end of the book, and there's a monster at the end of this book. But this will stop you from turning pages. See, I'm trying the pages together, so you cannot. You turn the page. And as a kid, I loved to, make him frustrated. I enjoyed it very much. The next page is the end of the book. And he went through a bunch more things. There were bricks, there were other things. You can see them, lots of things. He tried to stop me. I kept turning pages. The next page is the end of this book, and there is a monster at the end of this book. Oh, I'm so scared. Right there. That's clinging. He doesn't like it. Please don't turn the page. Please, please, please. And then who's at the end? Just himself. Lovable furry old Grover. And that's sort of the point of all of this, is that so much of what's happening in our daily lives is us trying to get away from things that we don't like, or us trying to hold on to things that we want more time with, when really there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just ourselves. And so if we open up in the present moment and accept more of it, that's where the beauty and the richness really comes from. He's embarrassed. Okay, so now here's a story about my life. So I got my PhD in Cognitive Studies and Education from the University of Pittsburgh, and I specialized in geographic education, how students learn it, how teachers can better teach it. That was my area of research. And as part of my curriculum, I took a class from Herb Simon, learning about how the human information processing system works. So this is exactly what we were just talking about with the links of dependent origination in terms of body and mind and contact. You have a stimulus, then you have this initial sense memory that happens that's very quick. And if you don't encode it into deeper long-term memory, you just forget about that. There's lots of things that happen every day that we don't remember, and then there's certain things that we do remember. So if you apply attention to whatever it is that is in that you have contact with, then it goes into your working memory. Working memory is rehearsed. It's 5 to 15 seconds without rehearsal, and then you forget it. But if you rehearse it, then you get it encoded into your long-term memory. So these are all the things that we remember when we talk about things. And so we can retrieve information out of long-term. Long-term memory is where our habits are. Long-term memory is where our identity is, of who we think we are. And so in every present moment, we have a stimuli coming in, and then our long-term memory is telling us what to think of that stimuli. And it's happening so quick that it's beyond even conscious thought. It's just very automatic. So when I first learned about the wheel of dependent origination, I was really amazed that not only did it envelop the human information processing system and how that all worked, but it also took into account emotions. And it linked the two together in such a way to explain where suffering is coming from. And if you ever sit in meditation and really examine these links in meditation, you can see the suffering arise. It's quite amazing. Okay, so then I had a unique experience on February 21st, 2004, about a year after I graduated with my PhD. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I temporarily lost my ability to form new long-term memories. So I felt very much like Dory in Finding Nemo. I would reboot every 10 to 30 seconds and not remember where I was going. If I was driving to the grocery store, I wouldn't know where I was going, but I had it written on the back of my hand, so I'd be driving along and I'd see something written and I'd look and then I'd remember, oh yeah, I'm going to the grocery store. Otherwise, I'd have no idea. And that went on for about 6 weeks. I had a craniopharyngioma brain tumor about the size of a golf ball in my suprasellar cistern, which meant that it was sitting on top of the optic nerves, growing out of the pituitary, and also touching the hypothalamus. For years, my hormones were off, out of whack, and it really impacted my memory. I actually lost my memory 3 times. while I was going through the brain tumor before I had the big brain surgery to remove it. And then for years afterwards, because I wasn't producing enough cortisol, I often would reboot, and I'd have local reboots and global reboots. And what I liken it to is this experience I call the during, where you're not in that present moment that's joyous that everyone describes, the present moment, like it truly is a present when you experience that. This was more like a battle and a struggle where I was constantly being thrown into my life, and I was miserable, and I didn't like it. I didn't like what was happening, and I was very much suffering. This kind of describes to you what happens when I describe a reboot. So first you have awareness arise. The lights are on, but no one is home. That's the link of consciousness that we describe here. Then immediately I have this feeling of who am I? Where am I? What happened? Trying to orient myself in time and space. Everything's very kind of fuzzy, and it feels like I'm sort of like soup big in the room, spread out, and I'm trying to put it back in the bowl, sort of like that. A lot of times global reboots would happen to me after I slept at night and I'd wake up in the morning. A lot of us have this sensation very quickly in the morning, but we sort of get over it so quickly that we don't even really consciously realize that this is happening to us. But it would happen to me in such a big way that it would take about 3 days for me after one of these episodes to sort of really feel like I was back in my body and on the planet again. I also had more local reboots happen, like being in the grocery store and information overload, and I wouldn't know why I was there, what I was shopping for, what was happening. Or I always lost my car when I was back out in the parking lot, had no idea where it was. I just couldn't access, the memory. As a result, it really taught me about the present moment and about how this whole system was happening, because I got to see it much more often and much more clearly than normally we do. So anyway, during these reboots, I would access long-term memories to try and figure out, like, orienting myself. And at that time, I was recently divorced and I was a single mom. And I would immediately panic and feel like I had ruined my entire life. Why was I divorced? Because everything I could remember about my husband was absolutely wonderful. How could this happen? How could I have ruined my life? I can't live this way. So that is some big suffering that was happening over and over, because I literally couldn't remember what had happened. Like when I had these global reboots, I would be about 6 years off of where I was. So I wouldn't have any idea what had happened. So I usually call my mom and ask her, crying, why am I divorced? How could this possibly have happened? And she'd have to tell me all over again. So reassembling my identity, again, took about 3 days. But there were other benefits I started noticing to it. I was more open to the mood of the day, sort of like each day had its own weather. And when I was out doing things in the world, I was more open to the present moment and things that might happen more spontaneously. So somebody needed help with their groceries, getting them to the car, I would help out. I would have conversations with people that normally I wouldn't. I wasn't as busy and single-mindedly focused on my tasks. I was more sort of open to and receptive to what was going on in my environment. As a result, I started experiencing a lot of synchronicities, sort of events just happening naturally that seemed, amazing, following them, a sense of peace. But I would also forget that I have limitations at that time. But I started to find the beauty of the present moment through this whole experience. This is sort of my analogy of what a global reboot feels like. It's like a huge 100-foot wave coming at you at 100 miles an hour. It's a lot. So now I want to talk about, what is the path leading to the end of suffering? We can talk about what causes suffering and how we're creating suffering for ourselves in our own life, even though it might not seem like it and it might not feel like it. We do this unconsciously. So then what is the way out? So the Buddha said, when this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of volitional formations, the cessation of consciousness. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So literally, it's just understanding, and usually for our conscious awareness, we'll realize, sorry, Siri, just gonna do this. We'll realize when we get to clinging, or maybe a habit, that we're doing it again. We're caught in some habits that don't serve us very well. And that's when we can take that moment to go back and trace it to contact and see what created that, what caused that to happen. Can you see it? Okay. So basically, if we have mindfulness of each present moment and we work very hard on sharpening it in our daily life, you can start to get to the point where you know what is causing what to happen. And that awareness is really helpful in eliminating some of the areas of suffering in our life. Because if we start to notice what our story is, what our attachment is, and I can tell you, it feels impossible when you're in that moment, and even when you see it and you realize what's causing you suffering, it still, at least from my perspective, feels necessary, feels like I had no other choice. I had to do what I do, and I have a whole story about why I had to do it. And that's really hard to go against. It's such a big habit in our culture to have justifications in a story about things, and just to only have so many options. And sometimes choosing a different option can come at a high price. Like we lose a relationship in our lives that's very important to us. But it's when we see the suffering happening directly, and we see that the other person wants it to be there and we no longer do, then that's not a match anymore. So anyway, the more we can increase our awareness of how this is operating in our lives in every moment, then we've got a shot. Okay. So this is an illustration that Ajahn Riti showed me that describes how we clean our minds. And if we really want to have awareness when we're out in our daily lives of where we're having problems with clinging and attachment and suffering, we need to practice meditation. So meditation is not just about relaxing, as so many people think. It's actually about cleaning your mind. And Ajahn Prayat told me that like we take a shower for our bodies, we clean our bodies, but people aren't taught to clean their minds. And that's why it's so important that we do that. The cleaner our mind is, the more likely we are to be able to be mindful in our daily life out when we're having a lot of contact. So they describe this as the path to nirvana. The elephant represents mind, which at the bottom you see is blue, which is dirty, and you can see it's running. It resembles mental dullness. The monkey represents distraction or mental agitation, and you can see he's running all around. The hare represents mental temper. The flames keep on diminishing along the way, which represents the amount of effort needed to put on cultivating understanding and recollection. At the end of the path, the monk can be seen riding the elephant across the rainbow, wielding the flaming sword of wisdom, and the same monk flying over those rainbows. These two figures represent uprooting the samsara by the unity of samatha and vipassana. These two figures also represent bodily bliss and mental bliss. So basically, as you're doing your meditation, you can see how the man gains control of the elephant and the monkey starts to settle down. Then he's in the tree and the hare is sitting on the elephant's back and the elephant's coming along nicely. This is all just an illustration to show how the more we practice meditation, we learn how to manage our energy. We learn how to bring things back into balance and alignment. We learn that we are not our thoughts and that our thoughts can settle down and we don't need to have them. And that is a crucial step in disconnecting ourselves from thinking of ourselves as a permanent self. Once you see that you're not your thoughts, then you start to have an experience of emptiness, which is really crucial. Okay. Idipachayata, the law of conditionality. As the texts have it, I can't pronounce all that, the world, the whole business, no matter what, the entire world is void of self. There is only a flow of idipachayata. There is no self-entity involved. The world, because it's not self-existent, must have come to be in dependence on other things. So it's called a paticca samuppanna dhamma. Mutual dependence can be seen in everything, in all things in the world at large. The world, the solar system, the sun, the moon, the stars, everything, the entire universe are all like this. All are dependently arisen. Suppose somebody believes that God makes everything happen. Well, that would sort of be right. But we would rather say that things arise in dependence on the law of nature, the law of idipachayata, the law of conditionality, which is the same as any God. The law of idipachayata makes everything happen. And this is very crucial because when you understand that things operate on conditions, that we have this body-mind suit that we're wearing and the consciousness that's in it that we take personally as a permanent self, and it comes in contact with the world and then creates certain habits and beliefs. Once you let go of that and you realize that you're just an ongoing moment-by-moment process, everything, the present moment opens up in front of you without all that baggage. Okay, when this exists, this naturally exists. Due to the arising of this, this consequently arises. When this does not exist, this naturally does not exist. Due to the quenching of this, this consequently is quenched. This is, again, getting back to how we can interrupt the wheel of dependent origination right at that point of craving and clinging. Soon as we have the I like it, I don't like it reaction, that's our chance to release that and welcome the present moment as just part of the ongoing moment by moment process that we're having in this life. That's what the law of conditionality is. That's being in harmony and balance with nature rather than fighting it, and that's why we get suffering. Okay, the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Now, Ananda, in as far as a monk does not assume feeling to be the self, nor the self as oblivious, nor that myself feels, in that myself is subject to feeling, then, not assuming in this way, he is not sustained by anything, does not cling to anything in the world. Unsustained, he is not agitated. Unagitated, he is totally unbound right within. He discerns that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world, except to enjoy the present moment. So again, it's just another explanation of what do we replace. We're so habituated to the wheel of suffering, and we're so used to it. And it's what everyone around us is doing. So it's almost like we need a new language to talk once we no longer have a permanent self. It's, one who does this, or, we don't take ourselves personally. Everything in this world is I. It's just a completely different way of looking at things. So what happens then? Sunyata, voidness, emptiness. When we manage to see in this way, then we know that all things are void of self, that there is only the flowing on and spinning around of paticca samuppanna dhammas, dependently arising and ceasing without end. If we see like this, then we see voidness by way of vipassana. If we have true wisdom, we will see all of the forms, sounds, smells, taste, touches, and mind objects, all of those sense objects, as dependently arisen and void. So therefore, it's not just a matter of understanding that we don't have a permanent lasting self. Nothing else and no one else does. And so then there's this sharing of experience, this deep interconnectedness through emptiness that permeates all things and all just having an experience. That's the end.
Today, I'm speaking from Atamayatarama Buddhist Monastery on behalf of the organization and on behalf of the Council of Thai People in the USA. Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Sarah.
ขอจงประสบชัยชนะ